Okay, we are recording, sweetheart. How are you, beautiful?
I'm good. I mean, there's just so much to keep up with every day.
Every day there's new bombs and all sorts going on. I'm freezing at the moment.
I'm cold. Oh my goodness. And right now it seems like most people, I mean, people just don't have time to learn, it feels like. And when you try to enlighten people, they refuse to listen. And they just want these simplified answers and even almost to be spoon-fed, and they just don't want to understand the journey towards the truth. So, and it never works because people don't see that it goes beyond simplified answers. And that's why even when you explain things to them, they still don't end up believing it. So,
Tiana, I've been, we've been trying to get this chat arranged for some time. And I have to say, first of all, thank you. This was the divine timing that we were supposed to speak. And you've impressed me so much with your eloquence, your emotional tenacity, and aptitude for, there's a sort of real maturity, but in a youthful way about you. Where I've seen you on Charlie Freak, I saw you on Sasha's show, and I was very, very much impressed because coming from the Asian community, both of us, we have our hurdles, as you very well know. It's a bit of a lonesome journey, especially where people haven't had the appetite or the inclination or necessarily the desire to speak up. There's several reasons for that, and we can discuss that later. Why is there being so much silence from the Asian community? Although a lot more people are waking up. So there's the fear factor, there's just social conditioning, cultural conditioning, etc., etc. But what really impressed me about you, Tiana, is just this eloquence that you have, and you are a part of the liberal, educated academic that are perhaps just not getting this, like you've just said. And you've had quite a journey. So thanks for coming on the channel. And I don't really look at it as like a channel or this big production. It's just a sister to a sister speaking, and this kind of sweetness that we have, and it's an unspoken understanding. Does that make sense?
Of course, I completely relate. I mean, thank you for having me. It's amazing that you've started this. I mean, you're growing so quickly as well. It's amazing. And I'm just so happy to be on this journey with you, and the fact that we do have similar backgrounds does just, we've spoken before, and we just relate to each other so much, and it's like being soul sisters, really. And so how have you been? How's everything going?
It's just, I mean, look at where we are. I think we connected when I was doing the protests in central London, and you messaged me, your mum messaged me. And I was just like, yay! I'm like really happy that I've got like a fellow sister messaging me, because these are topics that, when we spoke finally about the children, you were there, right, at the protest? We didn't get to see each other then, but my battery died that day. It was all kind of chaos, a lot of emotions. I've said this many times on my shows, that that caused me a lot of grief, and I couldn't understand why. And from what I found out later, is that a lot of the underground tunnels were in sort of the area that we walked, that route.
Under the Buckingham Palace. It's all over there.
So it was just an emotional day. But hey, if you remember, if we cast our mind back to that day, it wasn't as huge as the movement's become, both for the tyranny and the fascism that's going on with vaccines and the COVID scenario. But the children protest was quite emotional.
Yeah, for sure. I think, this whole journey, I think everyone's come, this lockdown, I think, completely has been such an awakening process for so many people. And at the least right now, what I'm facing with people is that I've realized that people like to have a villain, give me a villain that I can attack. And that's just an easier concept I've realized for people to understand. And because they can share the hatred and the fear around the globe. So because hatred is almost like a gut reaction and doesn't really require any due diligence. So it's instant and it's simple and it's non-cerebral. And so right now, this hatred that we have from our liberal friends for Trump, it's, you know, it's a great way for the controllers of the earth to manipulate us and just unite people in a collective hatred, isn't it? So, you know, the shadow government really have, they've got us where they really want us, because for hundreds of years, they've known how to divide us and how to rule us, and they've kept us at each other's throats.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what we're witnessing right now.
Yeah.
And
divided by religion, by culture, everything. You're right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how much breaking news you know already, because you've had so many conversations going on, but I have some updates. I know you probably know of the Rudy Giuliani COVID diagnosis.
Yes.
And I think we've all gathered that he's actually been put into a state of protective custody.
Yes.
But, you know, the thing is, though, if he's not seen for a while visibly, we've only got until the end of December to get all the piles of evidence to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So, you know, the incubation period, I think, what is it for the virus? About 2 or 3 weeks now?
Yeah, 3 weeks.
Yeah. So that, and I think that's exactly what happened to President Trump. I doubt he got COVID. It was all just a ruse to get him into the Air Force over the Pacific Ocean, where he was running things, I think, from the command center. And that was because there were threats that were made against his life and the First Lady. So I know that there's a lot of talk that Trump is bringing back Jeff Sessions as well. And that's another great chess move, because he was the moving force as the lawyer who wanted to stop the coyotes bringing the children across the Mexican border.
Right.
So he was the only one who said that we have to take away the children no matter how young they are. But it wasn't a separation policy by Trump. It was just a plan to remove the children from the child traffickers. Yeah. So there's been nothing on the mainstream media about any of this, about even about Governor Kemp. Have you heard about his daughter's boyfriend being assassinated, I believe, I think in a 3-car accident in some interstate highway? And obviously that wasn't an accident. It was a hit on the 20-year-old almost, I think.
A lot of that's gone on for decades, years and years and years. You know, hiding truth, you know, suppressing truth. There's so much going on, so many ruses going on. And it's up to us to discern and decipher. See, like even what's going on within the media at the moment. You have AG Barr. We thought it was a good one, but there's a lot of controlled opposition. So for myself, like when I heard you the first time, I could immediately gauge that you have a very shrewd and good command of being politically astute. I believe that, you know, your understanding of everything far ways, like outweighs mine, because I was never interested in politics. So for me, having to come into this, like even realizing what was going on within the shadow governments, didn't know that was the case. You know, I've had to learn very quickly in these 8 months, simply because I didn't have the understanding of it. When I've listened to you, you seem to sort of really know what's going on. You grasp it really quickly. And one of the questions I had for you was that, you know, within the youth, you know, your community, people your age group, what's the sentiment? Like what's the disparity and what's the disconnect and the sentiment towards Trump and what's going on in the world?
You know, currently everybody, I'm 24, and everyone in my generation, they just have no interest in politics and what's going on around the world. They're so disenfranchised and not really invested in the future of this country. And, you know, when in fact, they need to know that they are the future of this country. So the biggest issue right now that I see is that it's with this progressive liberalism that is seeping into the youth culture. And people are so obsessed with individual rights and things like, you know, phrases like toxic masculinity and alpha females. These are really big words for my generation. And it really stems from not having any knowledge about our political history and feeling pride in a nation, or even just remembering our roots. You know, we now have a generation of just emotionally weak people whose only aim is to just experience instant gratification of their senses. And this is why I really think that the first thing we need to do is change maritime law and go back to common law. And I'm starting a series about maritime law, but because I honestly think people my age, just students, they need to know the laws that govern us. And I think common law is obviously the only thing that will start changing this political process and will help get rid of the top 20% of the heavy bureaucrat government. But, you know, which means in reality that we have to get rid of the parliamentary system and all these established bureaucrats. But, you know, it's honestly, for my generation, it's just this progressive liberalism, and it's really destroying the framework of family life, of community life and social cohesion in this country. And the problem is that they're not even pretending anymore. They really believe that their point of view is somehow morally superior because they use all these skillfully designed language to make them seem so virtuous and altruistic. So it's difficult to argue with them sometimes because of the language they use. Like it's very skillfully designed, and
spot
yeah.
on, Tiana, spot on. On the head very well. And your background, if you don't mind, just for the viewers, what is it you're studying? Or
so I'm currently studying philosophy and Spanish. I was doing biomedicine first, and so I've changed degrees. And now, and I think it was my political philosophy modules that really got me involved in wanting to know more. So when I learned about, we learned about Marxism and liberalism and how just Karl Marx theories, politicians who are using Marx theories don't even know that these theories that they're utilizing come from Marxist principles.
100%.
So,
very good point. Yeah. Phenomenal. This is what I mean about you. Sorry to do this, and I've got a bad habit of doing this, but you're spot on, because for someone in your generation to understand that, Tiana, is phenomenal. And I had a chat with Bishop Larry Gators, and this is exactly what he stipulates. And just to see how far back this goes historically, the sense of like Marxism, liberalism,
right,
socialism, and where it actually stems from, and it's just sort of masked under this new form of new age liberalism.
Yeah.
Very well. Sorry, continue. I didn't mean to take you off your train of thought there.
No, that's okay. So, you know, just to answer your question, I just feel very strongly about this encroaching liberalism that's pervading the collective consciousness in Britain. And so it seems like anything goes these days. And so, you know, this lack of civic education is what the biggest reason, I think, is why we now have a society that cares nothing about being patriotic. They don't care about the economy, and they don't really care about the fact that the power of governance, good governance, lies with us, the people, and not the government. So to have any future, I really do believe that we have to understand our past. So I think that's how it needs to start, a revolution in the education system. People don't know that we have our own constitution in Britain, and it's called the Magna Carta. And that, you know, the Magna Carta is what laid the fundamental principles of common law. And, you know, common law trumps admiralty law, but people don't even know the difference these days. Yeah. So, yeah, that's really it.
I think within the youth now, you've raised some really phenomenal points there, sweetheart. You are a gem, because this is where the concern and worry has been. Now, we know that Trump has got, in our research, using our discernment, and gauging that he has got everything under control. And what's going on at the moment is a pantomime in the world arena. Okay, everything's being playing out because you can't tell people, they have to be shown. So with regards to the electoral fraud, we can't just sort of say, right, that this was all cheating, this was all fraud. It has to follow a protocol. It has to follow the legal procedure to then, you know, to show people that, look, this is how it happened, with proof and evidence, and going to the Supreme Court and showing the corruption within each of these fraternities. And this is what this whole play is about, to show the level of corruption that's been taking place, not just with the child trafficking, which is fundamentally, in my view, what all of this is about. And this is what has kind of got me down this rabbit hole. But to expose the corruption that's been happening within every establishment, every institution on the planet, and to see how this corruption has infiltrated, and that negative demonic energy is permeated in every corner of society. So where do we begin? You made a very good point. You have to understand where the roots of all of this comes from. It's not just go back to socialism, Marxism, and all of that. This is over like 12,000 years. This is spiritual. Yeah. So when you have this aptitude of understanding what's going on at the 3D political arena, phenomenal. But I also see that spiritual aptitude within yourself, that you can see what's going on. And that disparity in the youth is that being so indoctrinated, so desensitized, and they've been hit by smart technology. And the instant gratification of what has dulled down and numbed down the youth of today, which is social media. And it had a very, very good strategy. It serves its purpose. Yes, it has a platform, and it's given that, you see, it's had the duality, the good platform and the bad platform. But unfortunately, it's sucked people into a sense of like this, it's pinned on everyone's insecurities to a certain degree, where you have to keep up with whatever the trend is on a certain subject. So, you know, young girls are sort of pressure of looking a certain way and being taught that they can change the way they look through the filters, through all the sort of aesthetic changes that's been advocated on these social media platforms. And it's subliminally programming people in every single way that they're not good enough and hitting their self-esteem. Yeah. And it's been such like a slow poison for so many years that look at where we are now. So this car crash that, you know, with the COVID, everyone's been so easily controlled because the government has had everyone on tap, tell them what to do. Now, this critical thinking and thinking outside the box, because of this pseudo-intellectual arrogance within the academic fraternity, because of one of the things that I say is the labels that they ascribe themselves to, you know, the labels that they identify with. So it's label identity. So they are their doctor. They think that they are a doctor. The I am becomes their title. So we're losing that sort of that connection to our spirituality, and we're becoming a 3D person. And that's where I think, you know, we've lost sight of really truly understanding what's going on here, you know. And that's why, I mean, think about the indoctrination and hatred towards Trump. Look what's been happening on the news. You know, it's the frequency that all media, all news channels just drumming hate and contempt, divide, distraction, and false narratives. It's put people in fearful states. So my concern is, you know, I find this very interesting to hear someone from your generation. It's so refreshing, so refreshing. And I'm not saying this just to, you know, give you any false sense of flattery, but really it's worrying. It really truly is worrying. And we need people like you for your generation to represent the truth. I mean, what's the response that you've got from people that you know, from your background, and, you know, you advocating this truth from every sort of arena, you know, from the child trafficking to your knowledge of the political arena, and then encompassing it all within the spiritual capacity? How has that been received? And have you had any kind of struggles with all of that?
I think particularly with my political views, I've really tried to keep it, I haven't really extended my views to my extended family, but I've kept the political commentary to a minimum on my personal pages, because I did used to do it before, but, you know, you get so much backlash from people. It's just not worth it. And I think people really just aren't ready. But with spiritualism, I think everything is just, it comes from an attack on the family. And which is why I think everything, to really understand everything, we need a bird's eye view, and we really need to know our history. So I think I'm really worried right now about my generation, because they're adopting this indignation against this new word called cultural appropriation. And honestly, I think right now, especially with my friends and my family, I've tried talking to them, but like I said, a lot of my family are doctors from very high esteemed universities. So it's sometimes hard to argue with them, because they come from a place of being right, from a place of ego. So it's really hard to make them see your point of view and just listen. But, you know, I've really just tried to keep it to a bare minimum. I don't want to give so much knowledge where there's such lack of curiosity. So, which is why I opened my own page and my own channel, and just the right people are coming to me. But I've also had a problem with not wanting to create an echo chamber of conservative thought. So it is important that I have young people who are liberals come to me and explore what I'm trying to say and have an open mind, which is what I think people really lack these days. They claim to have an open mind, but I mean, it's not really open mind if you're not able to change your mind based on new information that you receive.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and how have you been received then when you try and relay your views?
Sometimes I can get through to some people who are willing to listen, and then there are others who just listen to respond, and you can tell very quickly with those sorts of people. So it's been really 50-50. A lot of people are very open to listening to me. And then
cognitive dissonance, a huge cognitive.
Oh, huge. But some people, you know, I don't underestimate the power of planting a seed, because at one point a lot of people, maybe they'll see something on the news one day and connect the dots. Who knows? You know, I think there is so much power in planting seeds in people and just speaking your truth. And people just need to know that there is another point of view out there, because we only see this one narrative on the media.
Absolutely. And where do you feel, you know, we've come a long way since you first went on Charlie Ward's show, which is where I heard about you, and Charlie, I spoke to him today and he just was so impressed with you, and he was just going, she's such a smart girl, and you know, he was just so complimentary, just because of your rationale, your train of thought. And one of my intentions to, when I came out with this like raw on the public arena, because of my naivety, I was just not interested. I didn't watch the news at all. I haven't watched the news for 10 years. I don't read newspapers. So I kind of was cocooned from what really was going on in the world. My inner self, I say this many times in the shows, that, you know, it just would not, something would happen to me when the news would be on. I'd start getting a funny feeling in my stomach. So, you know, I get why everything's happened now. But at the time I just was like, I just don't care. And it was a bit of an ignorant kind of brushing it off, that I don't really care. But where we are right now, and when I found out back in the beginning of this year, in March, I was disgusted. So I felt like, started going down the rabbit hole, researching 4 or 5 hours a day, getting further down the rabbit hole, feeling depressed, and like, holy crap, are we living in a world like this? It was just trauma, real trauma and wounding. And I was just like, oh my God. So I get why a lot of people just don't want to go there, because even the sort of thought to explore that this could be happening is just too much. So I sympathize. But for me, the motivation ultimately was when I realized within my own sort of surroundings and my family and friendship circles that it was such hardcore cognitive dissonance. So that propelled me to then speak to Charlie, thinking that if we say it in a public arena, it's going to have some impact. It had completely the opposite. So where do you feel, in your view, are we within the Asian community now, compared to, say, 4 or 5 months ago, with a lot of revelations, with all this drama being played out on a global scale?
Where do you think we are at the moment in the Indian community?
Yeah, within Asian, sorry. Yeah, within, as Asians, you know, have you seen some kind of movement, some sort of change, some kind of response?
Not particularly, not in the Indian community particularly, actually. I haven't really even, I've spoken to a lot of young people, but no, not really a lot of Bangladeshis, Indians, nothing, no, not really a lot of people from our culture. So I haven't really seen the movement grow within our community, but I mean, it's growing elsewhere. But I mean, in India, I can imagine right now, there is, of course, have you heard about the strike that's going on in India, which is so massive? And it happened
about it, tell me.
So it happened on the 26th of November, and it's the largest strike in history. And 250 million people went on strike, which is literally the population of America. Yeah. And this is huge news, and it wasn't reported on any of the mainstream. It's unbelievable, but expected. And I think an Indian paper called the I think it was called the People's Dispatch, and they said it was the biggest organized strike in human history. And it was the farmers, the workers.
Yes, yes, I did hear about this. Yes, yes, I did.
Yeah. And just all the women's rights groups and civil society groups that were participating in this nationwide protest. And now this happened in the background of the unprecedented attack on workers' rights and farmers' protections, I think, by the Prime Minister Modi. But can you imagine, Alpa, thousands of farmers broke blockade after blockade and marched into the city of Delhi, and even police repression, and they used water cannons on them repeatedly. But I mean, it failed to break the spirit of these people. So their demands were that, I think they were the withdrawals of laws recently passed by the BJP government to do with farm prices and just welfare schemes, and as well as the economic fallout of the pandemic. But this is what I believe Trump has achieved. So going back to your last question, I think, Trump has ignited a power in people. He wanted people to fight against their own governments, to bring them down themselves if they were not happy under their leadership. And so I think he's responsible for igniting people with this conviction to stand up to government tyranny. And he said that he would help them if they wanted help from America, but Trump was quite emphatic that he doesn't want to be engaged in regime change of the toppling of any government, because this has to be initiated by the people themselves. So I think, COVID has really woken people up to income inequality, to corruption and having no political freedom. I mean, even the protests in France, Alpa, against the French security bill that outlaws taking photos of police.
Yeah.
This in itself isn't such a massive reason for such violent protests, I think, but it is a reason for civic disobedience, and that's what's igniting people of the world who are unhappy with their leaders. And although
oppressive, very oppressive, in such a subliminal form that we don't even realize that this oppression has been taking place in our time in history, because we're so distracted by technology that we think we live in a democracy and freedom, and we're actually the most oppressed and oppressed in every government in every country. It's so controlled in such a subliminal way that when you actually come up and step out of the matrix, you think, oh my God, we're actually slaves. They're slaves, and slaves in so many different ways. And going back to India, I'm not sure, and this is why I find it refreshing speaking to you, that for some reason, I found keeping up with what was going on in India a little bit painful, and I soon realized that there's a lot of corruption in India, and the lockdowns in India were very, very harsh, weren't they?
Oh yeah, the second largest number of cases, right, of COVID.
Well, is that the truth, or is it that the highest level of corruption, and that he had the biggest swamp that he had to clean out? See, ultimately, Trump's got this in control. I don't know if you've heard of Sadhguru. And with
yes.
So there's a lot of religious spiritual leaders or authorities in the spiritual plane that have been exposed to be complicit, or implicated in some form, having an association or an entanglement with a celebrity or someone that's been complicit with the child sex trafficking, that whole horrible, nasty thing that we've all awakened to. So everyone who's associated in this club, you're looking at the Dalai Lama, the Deepak Chopras, the Oprah Winfreys, etc. So much has come out on the social media platform that it's pretty difficult to sort of now say, well, is he a good one or is he a bad one? We're not questioning now. So like, where does he stand? So my heart sank when I thought about Sadhguru, because I've loved his wisdom, and I think he's a really open-minded new age guru, right? He doesn't falsify anything, in my view.
Right.
And he advocates, individuality and think and organize the mind and sort this out. If I was to, relay what he's about in one sentence, he's just like, go inside, right? So when I realized that, oh my God, I didn't want to quite face that he could be a baddie.
Yeah.
And just the other day when I heard one of his videos, and he's got this brilliant initiative called the Youth and Truth program, where the youth of India ask him questions. And this was one of the questions posed to him about the Illuminati. And he talks about the Freemasonry and its historic European arm. It's phenomenal. And I'm like, my heart is sinking, thinking, what's he saying? And he goes, I'm not one of them. Yeah. So please don't think that I'm not a part of the Illuminati. And he goes, I'm not one of them. Right. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you. And he goes, ultimately, anyway, Donald Trump has got a handle of everything. Brilliant.
Oh, wow.
He's openly said that. So what do you think that's telling us, Tiana? No, let's put this in perspective. No political person or a celebrity is talking about Trump. If they're talking about him, they're saying they hate him. There's only a very few people openly speaking about Trump. So by him saying that, you know, Trump's got a handle of it, everything gave me some comfort, you know.
I think that's something we're all doing at the moment. We're really we can tell the bad seeds when they don't want to speak about Trump or say anything good about him. I think that's definitely become a personality trait that you can pick and choose your companions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's horrible to think that some of the people that you've idolized or just thought and deemed to be virtuous people are somehow now, you know, we're finding out so much. I think Mother Teresa was a hard one for a lot of people, and Oprah Winfrey, of course, she was, that was quite a shock for me as well. But yeah,
I loved all these people. I loved Obama. I loved, well, let me be honest here. It's not loved. I didn't watch enough TV to have that kind of, you know, relationship with anyone. But it's a disappointment because, you know, these are public figures and they have an impact. Like just like, you know, if you've got your own channel, there has to be some sort of responsibility of what we're talking about. Now, we're part of this movement, which is awakening people. And, you know, I have a disclaimer all the time. I said, look, my history knowledge is not very strong. And in a way, I'm glad, because these are accounts of another person's narrative. And, you know, through the academic channels, a lot of the stuff that we've been taught has been supporting their narratives, the Rockefellers, from my very minimal understanding. And I just look at everything quite pragmatically and think, wow, it just made so much sense, the level of control, when you look at everything like an org chart, yeah? And you realize sort of the 13 Phoenician families that have been governing everything for eons, and you sort of take it from there and it leads you down different roads. But ultimately, that indoctrination from the media and from the academic establishments is where they've hooked everyone from birth, to be fair, right? Through the vaccines, through the way that we're born even, yeah? How we're born, we're taken away from our mothers, and it's just everything that we've been taught is a lie, Tiana, everything. And then how best to control people is how they're taught. How, you know, if we simplify it, history and what we know and somebody else's interpretations of history, how do we know that is the truth?
We don't. No.
Yeah, we have to amass that critical thinking. Yeah, it's a book, but because it's got the credentials at the moment, because it's some person that was put on a pedestal in their sort of environment, in their profession, within their environment, so professors, etc., because they've studied and studied and studied. Right. Immediately gives them the title and that kind of authority within what they've done. And I get that. And I have respect for people that have studied and have, you know, researched a lot. But is that research correct? And we're looking within the whole COVID narrative. I mean, just look at how pathetic it is. When it's got
it's really just indoctrination, isn't it? You can't really call it academic learning anymore. But yeah, with the COVID, there's so much talk about the vaccine currently, right? But what's amazing is that you get labeled an anti-vaxxer or a conspiracy theorist, and it's horrible because people just need to do the research. It's all there. The fact that Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla, I think his name is, he filed to sell millions of dollars of his company's shares the day the vaccine was announced. Yeah. I mean, isn't that strange? Why would he sell his shares when in fact he could be making billions off of them? Yeah. And then the former top scientist of Michael Yeadon, I think his name is, claimed that the COVID vaccine has the potential to cause infertility in women. Yeah. Not to mention that he also literally said that the COVID is over and there's no need for a vaccine. So it's all there. People just don't, like I said, they just want to be spoon-fed. And if you just go to the CDC website, they'll tell you that they're putting in neurotoxic chemicals, which we all know are being added to the vaccines, things like mercury, formaldehyde, and aluminium. Aluminium is a direct attack on our pineal glands, because it's our pineal glands are the most sensitive parts of our nervous system. So aluminium can also cause dementia and Alzheimer's, and formaldehyde is actually a pickling chemical, and it's used to preserve dead bodies. So, I mean, it's obvious that it's very toxic to the nervous system, and it can cause, I think it causes blindness and brain damage. So I don't understand. And then I think there's also, I forgot the name, I think it's thimerosal, which is basically a methyl mercury compound. And we all know how toxic mercury is to the brain. And there's no such thing as a safe dose of mercury, yet they're brainwashing people to think that there is. And so.
But this, see, brilliant. And you're speaking about Pfizer's CEO, all this information that's coming out in the news, right? One of the core things that we need to really digest is that the media is in control by the white hats, right? So everything that's been coming out and the inconsistencies that are coming out in the media is to show people and start getting people to think that, hang on a minute, this paper said that Trump had this many wins, or this paper, the BBC was when the election was on, the inconsistent election results was so funny. It was just, but this is to show people, but it's amazing how indoctrinated they still are. So all this stuff that you're playing and saying about the Pfizer guy selling his shares, etc., it's all very telling. Why did he do that just before the vaccine was coming out? For me, I just sort of discerned my discernment, and I deciphered that as, okay, this is to show that something's not right, something that's up here. What's it saying about the vaccines? So this level of critical thinking is what's missing. There's a reliance, Sure. This is just a reliance that these academic echelon establishments are the correct way because they're the main source, because they're right. Who gave them that right? Who's behind them? Who backed them? Who funded them? No one's going there. So going back to your first point, Tiana, is that history and going to the root cause of where we are today, people are lazy. They don't want to do that. They think that they've studied all this time, reading the modules, the syllabuses that they've been told to read, and because they've got trust in the system, right? They've got trust in the system. Why? And they've got that sort of like political kind of bias and debate, and they feel that they've got that level of democracy and critical thinking, but in reality it's just one narrative from that institution that they're learning, right? If that makes sense. Really. So they're churned out that way. I never sort of enjoyed studying. I'm not an academic, so I went down the business studies route as an Indian, as every Indian does, international business, or a doctor or a dentist or something like that. So I went to Manchester, and I just found it really, really difficult to feel connected to academia. And that's just me because of my sort of spiritual journey here on this planet. But I don't even know how I passed. I did all right, actually. But when I think back to the way we were taught, it was just one-sided. It was just a one-sided left brain narrative. And I don't remember any of it, to be fair, you know? So, yeah, so I've just gone off, I digressed there, but it's, the media is completely in control by Trump, I think. That's my view. And everything is just playing out to show people, and it's going to take some time.
Yeah, I completely agree. They said that, I think, 20% of the information will come out. I'm not sure exactly how much, but people really do need to see, because especially the young generation, we're so obsessed with the wrong kinds of things right now. We're obsessed with just things like cultural appropriation. I mean, the young generation don't really realize that it's this cultural blending which is central to the development of a civilization. And this is just another new frontier of cultivated victimhood. And we constantly think that we say things like marginalized people from a particular culture are somehow supposedly wounded when privileged people just enjoy their culture without their permission. This is, identity politics, and this is what I really want to change within the young. We're going back to completely destroy everything Martin Luther King accomplished. And the crazy thing is that culture cannot be owned, right? I was watching Katy Perry the other day. She wore a kimono at the American Music Awards, and this provoked like a Twitter meltdown, because we're now living in this outrage culture. And my fear is that, this is not just a fringe idea, but it's in fact a progressive concept that's becoming an increasingly mainstream idea. I mean, it's sickening, Alpa, that Hollywood has a war against traditional values that have become so obnoxiously aggressive. And Hollywood is not just about making money anymore. It's also about promoting amoral, not just immoral agendas, and to promote these perverse lifestyles. And, there's a force in this industry that says it's more important than more than making 100 million, it's more important to somehow plant seeds in the minds of young people, which is what they're doing. And, that takes away all notion of ethical behavior. That I constantly feel like Hollywood is promoting this anti-parent sentiment, where you see all the shows that we watch now, the kids are just directly disobeying their parents, showing there are no consequences for bad behavior. And the Grammys this year, I think, was an abhorrent just example, with explicit performances starting at 8 p.m. when children are awake. And do you remember the movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, with Leonardo DiCaprio?
I actually did watch that.
I think it's an Oscar-nominated movie, and it's not that good, but somebody counted that the F word was said about 500 times. How can you call that sort of movie creativity? I mean, do you need to drop profanity into a sentence to make it powerful?
Yeah.
So what we're seeing right now really is just an outright assault on traditional family values and faith in God. Single mothers, I mean, the frequent revolving door of boyfriends that the children witness as they grow up. This is what Hollywood does. It makes wholesome, inspiring stories seem tacky and full of corny cliches, like those tepid Hallmark movies. And honestly, Alpa, there's not one TV series or Hollywood movie that I can watch with my parents and siblings without being uncomfortable that there'll be an open homosexual scene or profanity or just vulgar, dirty jokes. I mean, we're just not brought up like that. And I'm sure you weren't, right, in our culture.
Speaking of profanities, where my patience has been worn thin, I found myself saying the F word once or twice a day in like some sort of like impatient way. But I agree with you, this level of profanity and crude behavior and vulgarity within the mainstream sort of Hollywood fraternities has just become more and more and more, reducing sort of the sanctity of family values. And you're speaking about Katy Perry earlier on, and well, she's not a good one, right? She's totally sold her soul to the other side, and these are figures that are representing some perverse type of culture where they have the power to actually dictate a sentiment in society and for the youth. And it's very disappointing that, especially now, it's very interesting to see who's coming out and speaking about the child sex trafficking. It's very telling so we know that there's been sealed indictments, and Trump has got all of these people in Gitmo apparently, or that they're playing a role, or they have to show themselves up by their support for Biden or whatever their situation is. But it is a very valid point that you've made, that it is quite it's disheartening, because my mum would always say that. I used to take the mick out of her, and she's just going, Alpa, it's just the youth of today, it's just getting so vulgar. And then I'm shocked, and there's that innocence that kind of she feels is being robbed of our generation, even within the Asian culture, the way when she was horrified when she went to India not so long ago, to see how it's changed within sort of the societies, sort of the open societies. Everything's about within the higher societies, what goes on there, how far westernized they've become in not the appropriate ways. And I say that not with judgment, I'm just saying it this through observation. And yes, I came from quite a conservative background. You know, my mother was very strict on manners and discipline. Raised in a Catholic school. I got confused at that part because like very Indian, and then she sends me to a Catholic school. This is the best, right? And then I had to go to the state school, so there's a huge disparity from the kind of education that I've had just through our personal family situation back then. It, you know, growing up in that kind of reserved environment, being the kind of person I am, sort of very independent and questioning things, she didn't have the aptitude to kind of cope with that, because I was just why, and it kind of like suppressed me in because they don't come from an academic background, my family, so she wasn't so much like very like strict about studying, but yet she said that you should and you have to and you've got to go to school, etc. So for me, I did the shoulds and the coulds and the woulds because of, you know, just you listen to your parents. But coming back to sort of the way her opinions and my parents' opinions go to how the youth of today has, like, should I say progressed or should I say regressed, or I don't know where they've gone, but they find it quite alarming. Now, that's not to say that everyone's like that. It's just the influence that, you know, the media fraternity has on our youth. And it's very important, the points that you raised, that they have a responsibility, Tiana. Yeah, with over 130 million people following them, that's huge. Like, you've got The Rock, you've got the Kardashians, you've got these people that are on social media, which are the platforms the youth are just hooked on, addicted at the moment. So it's a power play. This is all deep state, shadow governments, and everything that has been revealed this year. We can understand this is all to do with controlling the mindset and psyche.
Completely.
Of the younger generation.
Yeah.
And we've got an arduous task ahead of us to unhook that.
Yeah.
You know, a friend of mine recently told me that in her school, very well established school, very privileged school, the young girl, no issues in the family, it was a very stable family, very happy. She just killed herself when she was only 11. She committed suicide. Unknown bullying in the school. We don't know, family were just like, we don't know what's happened. And this was just a few months back. What's happening? What they're watching? What's going on within the piece? You know, these are the things that worry me. My little niece, I've said this in a few of my videos, you know, was saying, I can't wait for Trump to die because he's got coronavirus, because he's a horrible man. I said, where did you learn that? She's only 6. She goes, oh, my teacher told me. If this is the narrative that the you know, political bias and the conceited mind frame that people have, not just for Trump, but what you mentioned earlier on, it's this kind of new age feminism and this kind of what was the phrase you used? You said something.
Masculinity, things like that, alpha feminism, yeah.
Alpha feminism and all of that, yeah, brilliantly put, because that's what's happening. That's what's being pushed. We've been pushed these agendas, and you know, we've got this disconnect to what we really are supposed to be, you know, spiritual beings, light, consciousness, and all of that's just gone out the window. But now there is a turn astronomically, you know, it's in the stars now. We're seeing a shift energetically, you know, which is really sort of purging our inner wounds. We're forced now. We're forced to confront ourselves from an inner plane. This is what I feel anyway. And in my journey, that we can look at all of this as bystanders and observe and be at the other end to help people. And I think you're going to be a leader, Tiana, in this movement for your generation. You really are. And I think you definitely have the emotional intelligence and just every form of intelligence to be able to move this forward in a way that benefits humanity as a whole. And I hope you do that, because, you know, the youth needs to have more and more people to think the way you think. You know, you get it, and it's inspiring. And so, tell me, you have your own channel, your own YouTube channel?
Just started completely, because three of my Instagram pages were taken down.
Legend. You know, you should wear that badge with pride.
So, you know, Alpa, like you said, this really needs to start with the young generation. I really personally would love to start mobilizing my generation to bring back good old-fashioned, honorable and dignified attitudes, really. Otherwise, I don't think the 21st century of civilization will survive. And we're being taught for a long time now that, for example, if you stay with your parents, you're a loser. And as you know, Alpa, we've lived in family units, especially as I grew up in Bangladesh, where the grandparents lived with us and they looked after us while the more able were able to go to work and do business or work in the farm. So generations in our culture mixed all the time. And it taught me personally to be very tolerant and patient and understanding of how to have relationships with different types of people without getting upset or irritated or annoyed with people's shortcomings. And this is a great lesson in life, and I think our culture really gives that to us. When I see some of my English friends and their complete inability to adapt and wisely handle relationships, whether it be friends, family, or even spouses, it just astonishes me that they have all these university degrees, like you said, and high-paying jobs, and yet they're so selfish. There's no emotional intelligence, and it's all about them. And they feel that accepting and settling and compromising are just a sign of being a weak person. And they think, why should I sacrifice what I want? So it becomes an issue of individual rights over the collective community rights. And, the nuclear family, which has just about survived in the West, is not necessarily a good thing either. Just husband and wife and kids. The growing divorce and single parents in the UK by, I think, the late 80s was evidence that family disintegration and the subsequent creation of step families is just creating incalculable damage to children. And I think it's because since World War II, there's just been a systematic governmental agenda to make it economically hard to all live together. And the cost of living just gets higher and higher with more people. So honestly, I really worry about the future of Britain, the divisiveness of the left that has seeped into the collective mindset. And it will take years to readdress, but the thing is, the left they don't argue coherently. If they don't agree with someone, they just resort to crude insults against anyone who just dares to challenge them.
Yeah.
So
it's become that level of contempt.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Completely. They shut down anyone who wants to debate them on a topic by bullying them and labeling them as an extremist or a narrow-minded bigot. They have a very fixed belief in their superiority and their righteousness. So they deem themselves as clever and civilized champions of liberal thought. In fact, they're not really liberal anymore. And it doesn't even occur to them that there is another way of looking at the world. And I'm talking about so many family and friends. And it's a very victim mentality where you don't take any personal responsibility, any accountability for your own actions or, for your self-discipline, really.
And you've put that so well. Victimization is the mindset that people don't even realize that they are. They live within that victimhood. The whole Black Lives Matter, the Asian mentality, victimization, the dramas that we see, the poor me, but, living at that level, we are so advanced, or should be so advanced in civilization and societies of every single culture and religious, or don't really like to put the word religion in there, but from every single faith culture, we should be really, really advanced where we are in humanity right now, yet we're still fighting over things that these levels of suppression that we shouldn't be. And victimization, it's like when I was speaking to a really good speaker, the Bishop Larry Gators, he talks about the victimization of Black Lives Matter. And I sort of was thinking, I went and pondered back and reflected that that's similar in the Asian culture as well. I think the point that you raised about how we are from like sort of the nuclear family, and some of your white friends may not have that adaptability. For me, I've grown up predominantly with a lot of non-Asian friends, and I've had a very international sort of group of friends. So I've never been one of these cliquey kind of just have Asian friends. And where I have, and this is just probably my own experience, I've found now that as I've gone like to the West, because in this movement especially, it's the Asian community, from the people that I know, have absolutely no idea what's going on. And I say this with utmost respect. I love my culture. I love where I'm from, and I'm proud of that. I don't have any kind of identification though to anything or anyone. Yeah, I'm as a human being in the spirit, right, in this world, and having a conscious experience. And that's where, you know, there may be a little bit of like conflict there from my fellow Asians, because I don't identify with anything. I've come from the Asian background, and I love it. I love our cultural values. I love everything about being an Indian. Yeah, but that doesn't give me that train of thought where I think I'm far superior than anyone or far less. So I don't identify with anything or anyone like from that train of thought. But what I have found though is that these sort of clusters, this cliques, this sort of thinking our spirituality has been robbed from us from, you know, the days of the colonial rule. They have taken away the spiritual, sort of esoteric, mystical knowledge from us, and sort of the West are adapting to it more. And I find that the culture and the youth here in Britain, especially, just from observation, every weekend is about going out and getting trashed, right? Not for everybody. I'm not saying everyone's like that. I'm not stereotyping everybody. It's just observation. So when I try within people that I know to have a conversation about spirituality, the association is just to do things from a ritual perspective, right? Let's just do this let's do this and conform, without realizing that they're actually conforming. So I sort of have stepped away from that, and I'm finding my own sort of rhythm and my own voice. And I've always been different like that within my family. And I've always felt sort of different from my cousins, my friends, but the adaptability though has always been there. I can get on with anyone from any generation, from any faith, from any cultural background. So I don't see that sort of indifference. I don't like that pigeonholing. And that's where I have that open heart, that open mindset. Where I feel right now has been the struggle for me, and that is a trigger, and I get that. So I take it back to self, right? I take it back to self. Is that where is this that's affecting me? That, like, why, for example, are my family just in so much cognitive dissonance, not open to even listening about this, sort of really complying, conforming the subordination to what the government tells them? So we've got to do this, stay 6 feet apart, you know, got 6 people. I mean, there's a hokey cokey, the whole thing with the COVID. I couldn't keep up. I didn't know what was going on. I'd have to ask I rock up everywhere without mask, and somehow no one even, I have that look on my face that don't even tell me to wear one because I'm not going to, right? So I think the whole thing's nonsense. The whole thing is not, I don't even know what, it's become so much nonsense that I don't even talk about it in my shows. Like, it's almost like I don't realize that we're in this COVID narrative, but I have to start talking about the vaccines because that's what's there and keeping up to date with what's going on. But where is the common sense in a lot of this? That's what baffles me, because I haven't considered myself to be anything clever or smart. In fact, I always demise myself against my sort of, like, I got a 2-2 at uni, and I didn't feel very clever compared to all my LSE, King's College and UCL mates, and all my friends happened to go there. And I was like, as we say, angutajap compared to everybody, you know? I was angutajap, and I was like not the most cleverest one. I was the B or the C one, and never the A, you know, I just was in the middle. But this is what I'm saying. There isn't a left or a right. We have to come in alignment within who we are. Yeah. And we have everything. We encompass everything that we see. Everyone that's sort of presented to us are mirrors, right? So it's going back to this sort of subjective sense of self, to know who we are, but we get trapped in this ego. And the ego is what prevents people to move forward progressively in the right way, the righteous way. And that's what I noticed. So now, where I can kind of look with like a clear vision and like, oh my God, I get this, right? And then the people that I perhaps thought were the most brainiest or cleverest are the ones that are perhaps the most ignorant. I don't blame them, because I see how trapped they've been into the system. And do you remember those toys you get where you can like really twist like those little ones, and then they just start moving like this? That's what I feel like people have just come out of the sort of academic system. You just really twist really hard. And I think this is what's going to be a slow unraveling, unweaving of these sort of, who says it? Sasha says it, this sort of dream spell that they're in, of their reality, where in fact, this is all going to come out, and there's going to be a lot of casualties, I think. I mean,
Of course.
and going back to India, Tiana, and what's going on there, I you know a lot more than myself. I put my hands up because I haven't ensconced myself in, you know, what's going on in India, because I don't know why, it just hurts, and I'm not sure what's going on there. But when I find out about the kind of secret societies and like really who has control these thuggy societies going back from generation to generation to generations, it's very scary. And the control and the corruption levels is terrible. And this is why people don't speak up.
Yeah.
Because of the fear that you'll just get whacked.
Oh yeah, very much, very much. I think right now in India, I mean, I only heard about this news just a few days ago. It's honestly, it's just getting so hard to keep up. There's so many protests going on all over the world. There's, I think, Italy is on their 18th day of protest now, which is absolutely, it's abysmal that they're not showing this on mainstream media. It's absolutely so sad. And the fact that, you know, whenever I do have conversations with my liberal friends, they don't realize they love people like AOC. Have you heard of AOC? People, I mean, people love her. People on the, my liberal friends love AOC, and they don't realize that socialism, like I said before, is another Marxist idea. And I think right now we just have so many communists posing as socialists. And I mean, like you said, it's common sense. You're seeing people who are fleeing from communist countries to now come to America, and now, I mean, why would they want to flee from a communist country to come back to a communist country? You know, people from Colombia, they're not coming into America to not have a free country. And, you know, countries have always had their very rich and their very poor, but they always also had a very good middle class, right? And it's the middle class that glues a society together. They are the backbone of a democracy. And, you know, the middle classes are what people have, you know, they're the people who have core values that other people can identify with, who also have morality. So, you know, they are now part of, I think, what I call the ranks of the really poor, because their incomes are stagnating and going to the ultra rich. So I really believe this is a product of the new liberal economic ideology. It's just a complete socialist infiltration to the collective political conscience, and that's what's pauperizing this group. So, you know, it's blatant social engineering, and the end of the middle class has meant sorry, my light has come down. Hold on, let me just screw this on. Okay, I don't think I can. Anyway, but what I was saying is that, you know, it's blatant social engineering, and the end of the middle class is going to mean the end of middle class values and things like discipline, morality, and hard work and education and just good manners. You know, Voltaire, I think, summed it up pretty perfectly. He said, the British class system is like, it's like they have their own beer. The froth is at the top, the dregs at the bottom, and the middle is excellent. Yeah. So people really need to realize that we need the middle class.
That's great analogy. Brilliant. But I think with the movement that's going on worldwide, we are in the most amazing times to be alive if we have the eyes to see it, right? Yeah. This is the radical change that's taking place on the earth. You know, where all of a sudden have we started talking about this children stuff just over the last 4 years, especially this year? Why is there acute awareness about it? Why are we having access to all this information where, you know, we're privy to this? And, you know, before there was huge censorship of this type of information. So somebody obviously started this movement, started sort of breadcrumbing the platform, social media, which they're saying is Q. What Trump has been doing from day one when he took power in 2016, he was on the, you know, get-go from day one, cleaning the swamp, cleaning the corruption. Do you think that that was going to be an easy task? It's an arduous task, a very arduous task, the level of corruption within every establishment, every institution, in every country. And people don't want to acknowledge that what he actually stands for and represents. He's not politically correct. He wants to instill these values back within family, you know, and not advocate all of this, you know, Planned parenthood, abortions, and the single parent family, bring back family values, needed for sustaining like good mental health basics, going back to the basics. And I think he's so misunderstood, and it's just because of the way the media have portrayed him. So, Asians, Indians, a lot of people have a big hatred for him. Why? Because they are just so and even like in the Muslim community, they can't stand him because of the way. Actually, I'd like your take on that. I'd like your take on how it is within the Muslim community. When you mentioned the word Trump, I mean, is it like really difficult for you?
I mean, it's not really difficult, but I think, there is some sense of partisanship within the Muslim community because of what Trump has done with the Golan Heights, for example. Like, what was it that happened? He gave the Golan Heights to Israel, I believe, right? Yeah. Did you hear? And then, the peace deal with UAE, I think.
He moved the embassy as well to Jerusalem.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, with that, having said that, I think there is some criticism about Trump in that regard, because, I know he's returning the original constitution he's doing some amazing things, right? He's returning to the original constitution of 1776. He's increased the GDP of the third quarter, for example, up to 33.1%, even after the worst quarter in history because of the pandemic. And I just can't wait until he also makes Judy Shelton the chairman of the Federal Reserve. But if Trump can merge the Federal Reserve...
Has he already become? Oh, it's not publicly, because he's taken over the Federal Reserve in March.
Right, exactly.
And how many people know about that?
Not a lot. I don't know anyone who knows about it.
The US Treasury is now in command, and who is the exchequer? Donald J. Trump, right? Exactly. So he's literally the exchequer of the world. He's controlling everything.
Exactly. So now he'll be able to take back the trillions stolen by the Fed, and there'll be no petrodollars or fiat money. So going back to your question, however, I think what people in the Muslim community are skeptical about is his stance on the Middle East. And I don't think it was particularly right that he gave the Golan Heights to Israel and that he made Jerusalem the capital of Israel. I mean, Alpa, that is the most, it's the Middle East. I don't think it was I think it was completely wrong because it's the most sacred city for all Abrahamic monotheistic religions, right? Like Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Yeah. And then with the Abraham Accord, he presumably made peace deals between Israel and UAE, Qatar, and then also Bahrain. And I know other Middle Eastern countries will join, but these nations don't have any real issues with Israel anyway. And worst of all was the public humiliation, I think, that was felt by ignoring Palestine and all of these diplomatic dialogues, right?
This is the main concerns of the Palestine-Syria sort of issue. Yeah. From my understanding, so this is where, my keeping up with the news when all of this was happening to understand what was going on then, I foreshortened because from my understanding, Netanyahu is in a big child baddie, adrenochroma. And I'm not sure if you knew that. So Israel has capitulated to Trump, right? Yeah. And you have all countries that capitulated to Trump. Now, Trump was sort of sectioned off as a sort of undercover Zionist, and you've heard all of that, right? That he's a Zionist and he's not. He's not, but yet that this move from the embassy to Jerusalem sparked a lot of animosity, as well as these peace deals. So, that subject for me is ambiguous.
Me too. I mean, I completely agree. I think I'm willing to know more about this, and I have an open mind because I don't think I know enough. I would love to know more.
I mean, even the sanctions that were posed to Iran, and ultimately the scientists that got killed, well, they were very heavily involved in the foreign interference of the elections. So the Dominion software had links to Iran, and they were hugely involved in this. So this executive order of 2018 has been a massive catalyst, because if you put it in perspective in layman's terms, and this is for someone who's not politically astute, and I just thought, bingo, he's killed sort of two birds with one stone, so to speak, because how are we going to expose the level of corruption? Where do we start? So we want to take down the media. first of all. So the executive order for 2018 stipulated that any foreign interference in the US elections will face severe consequences, whether it was direct, indirect, or of any propaganda nature, from my understanding. Yeah, that means that everyone that's going to be complicit and has been implicated will have all their assets seized, etc., and the consequences will be dire. So if we put it in perspective, this is how they were going to expose the media, because the media has been like the propaganda in the media. It's just there for everyone to see now. It's just so obvious. I mean, you know, we've got Billy Shakespeare that's taking injections. Right? You know, and it's crazy, all of that. But going back to sort of the election, it's exposing the fraud, it's exposing how the media's handled it. And if you think about the Russia hoax, Russia, because what was all that about? Foreign interference. So it's a very strategic game of chess that is being played here.
Tie everything together at the end.
So the software, the societal software, you know, the results were being like determined in Spain. You have Venezuela that were some sort of system, Dominion software was being programmed or something like that. I can't know all the technical accuracies. And then you've got Germany, the servers in Germany. So and Iran was heavily involved as well. So when people start asking me questions about like, well, he's done this in Iran and look at what he's doing with Syria and Palestine, I'll be honest with you, I don't know enough. I don't know. I haven't come across the whys. Why is he doing that for us? Just see he's doing peace treaties everywhere. There's going to be more and more. And I think he wants to give back the autonomy to every country and have a level playing field where we are at equal, like, you know, everyone's got sovereignty back of their country. Right. And we are competing equally, you know, properly, fairly. But like, this is where, until the whole thing with the Muslim communities and, you know, like not letting immigration into this whole stuff with immigration and illegal immigrants coming in, there's a huge animosity towards him because of that. And all those various tabloid sort of like, you know, titles why Trump is the boogeyman and the horrible dictator that he's been painted out to be, so they don't get publicly ironed out. We've still got a huge problem. So have a huge problem of how people perceive him, and then think that we're crazy for supporting him.
Yeah, I mean, look, we know we do criticize where criticism is necessary. And I think also another thing with Jared Kushner is someone that I'm quite interested in knowing more about, because he's a senior advisor whose peace plan Trump has adopted. Yet, you know, it seems to favor Israel. So he's an out and out Zionist. And I don't know whether we should trust him, especially when he got offered with massive donations from his father. So, you know, that we do have a lot of questions still in certain aspects about Trump. But yeah, I'd love to know more. So when you know, let me know.
Yeah, God, we could go on and talk forever. I've got another one in literally 7 minutes. So Tiana, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and I am so impressed. You know, you are a smart, intelligent woman, and I feel proud of you, you know, and humbled that you've come on my show. I see you like a little sister, and, you know, you teach me a lot, and, you know, I think that you're going to be a very good role model in this movement. And I urge you to and implore you to just continue this, you know, and get your voice out there, because you will be, irrespective of what, you know, the thorns along the path, you know, the path of truth is the road less traveled, but it will have a wider impact for the greater good of humanity. And you're going to be the change for, you know, you are our future. Your generation is our future. So thank you so much. And, you know, you're beautiful, and we'll have another one very soon.
Okay, thank you, Alpa. Thank you so much for having me.